She would come home late, but she always smelled like my home. Or so I thought. Emily had started staying late at work more often. I would hear the front door creak quietly sometime after midnight, as if someone was afraid of waking an old house. There was no falsehood in her voice, no coldness in her touch. And yet, inside me, a strange anxiety kept growing, like a hair under the skin, invisible but with every movement more painfully reminding me of itself. Sometimes, in those rare moments of silence, I would catch familiar scents, her shampoo, the faint aroma of coffee on her skin. They wrapped around me, almost convincing me everything was fine, she was home, everything was just like before. But somewhere deep inside, a feeling stirred, the unsettling sense that it was all a lie. That what I smelled was the smoke from a long-dead fire, not real warmth. I kept convincing myself it was just fatigue making me suspicious. Overwork, the change of seasons, the routine exhaustion of marriage. Any of those things could have explained her distance. But sometimes she looked at me with an expression I couldn't explain. As if she wasn't seeing me but someone else. Or remembering something she would rather forget. When she sat next to me on the couch, I could feel her warmth, and yet it felt like an invisible wall had grown between us. She laughed at my jokes, just like before, but her laughter was different, sharper, almost forced. And I smiled back, playing the same game, pretending nothing was changing, pretending the house still stood on a solid foundation. One night, I noticed something unusual. She had forgotten to take off her heels, something she almost always did. Usually, she would slip out of them the moment she stepped into the hallway. The sharp click of heels echoed against the parquet floor, disturbing the cozy silence. I looked up and saw her standing by the window, gazing thoughtfully into the darkness. I wanted to ask, "What are you thinking about?" But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I simply watched her. Watched my wife, who smelled like my home, or maybe just the illusion of it. Some cracks remain unseen until it's far too late. Some feelings die quietly, but their shadows still roam the rooms, breathing false hope into us. In her drawer, I found a box with a gift. No card. No occasion. It happened by accident. I was looking for insurance documents, a mundane, tedious task. Papers rustled under my fingers, and the air in the room was thick with dust and forgotten life. I pulled folder after folder until one shifted aside, revealing something that didn't belong. A small box. No ribbon. No signs of hurried opening. It simply lay there in the half-light of the drawer like a silent reproach. Holding my breath, I lifted the lid. Inside, a bracelet. Delicate, light, intricately crafted. It didn't resemble the things we once picked out together. It bore no mark of our past. It bore no mark of our present either. No wrapping. No clumsy card with a scrawled "with love." No explanation as to why it was there. It looked new. And at the same time unbearably old. Like a memory of something that had never belonged to me. I touched the bracelet carefully. It was cold, like water at the bottom of a well. I tried to remember, was there a day, an occasion, a moment I had forgotten? An anniversary? A birthday? New Year's? No. I would have remembered. And most importantly, she had never worn it. It had never caught the morning sunlight on her wrist. Never jingled softly when she poured her coffee. It existed apart from the life we shared, like part of another story, one I was never invited into. I closed the box. Slowly, as if hoping to erase the very fact of its existence. I shoved it back deep into the drawer, burying it under papers no one had touched for years. I could have asked. Could have demanded an explanation, made a scene, or at least forced a clumsy conversation. But I did what I always did when the truth became too terrifying. I chose silence. And with every passing day, the silence grew. Like a crack spreading under paint. Like mold creeping beneath wallpaper. Sometimes at night, I thought I heard a floorboard creak near her desk. And every time, my imagination painted the same picture. Her standing there in the dark, holding that little box in her hands, weighing something I no longer had the right to know. The most frightening gifts aren't given. They're hidden. They are like letters without an address. You're never meant to find them. But once you do, everything changes. Her phone screen flashed. One message. 3 words, waiting for you always. The night was deaf and hollow, as if the house had fallen into a void. Only the ticking of the clock and her steady breathing broke the silence. I lay beside her, feeling the bed grow colder between us, despite the warmth of her body. Sleep wouldn't come, my thoughts churned like a heavy cloud, pressing down on my chest. I had almost given up, almost turned to face the wall, when her phone screen quietly lit up. Soundless. Almost politely. A small patch of light cut through the darkness. My eyes were drawn to it instinctively, like a moth to a flame. On the screen, a message. Short. 3 words, waiting for you always. The sender's name was erased. Only a number remained, blank and faceless, like a ghost. I froze as if the world around me had ceased to exist, leaving only that one phrase. Simple and terrifying in its tenderness. To wait forever, it was more than love. It was a promise. A habit. A bond. Maybe it was a mistake? A joke? An old friend? A random wrong message? I grasped for excuses, chasing them like flashes of light behind closed eyelids, but none of them sounded believable. Slowly, I sat on the edge of the bed, as if moving too quickly might make everything collapse. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to guess. How many more messages like this had passed me by? How many words had flown past, unnoticed, while I clung to the illusion of comfort and quiet? The room smelled of her perfume and the cool night air drifting in through the open window. Everything looked familiar. And yet it didn't. Emily stirred in her sleep, mumbling something unintelligible. I flinched, caught as if guilty, even though I hadn't even touched her phone. Maybe I should ask her in the morning. Maybe I should force myself to believe I had imagined it all. I turned off the screen, carefully, as if touching something alive, something dangerous. I slid back into bed, lay on my back, listened to the silence, now stretched tight as a wire. Maybe it means nothing, I kept telling myself. Or maybe it means everything. But inside me, something slow and inevitable had already begun. Something that would never again let me sleep peacefully. Some answers hide in the dark, and the longer you look away, the louder they whisper your name. I heard her voice from the kitchen, but when I went to look, she was asleep in bed. Sometimes at night, I thought I was losing my mind. I heard her light footsteps in the kitchen, soft, almost weightless. I heard the clink of glass, a muted laugh, as if she were talking to someone. Each time, I got up, slowly, cautiously, as if afraid of startling something fragile, something barely real. And each time when I walked down the dark hallway, I found only silence. The kitchen was empty. The window closed. The lights off. Everything in its place. And when I returned to the bedroom, there she was, lying in our shared world, warm, lost in deep, untroubled sleep. Her fingers barely moved against the sheets, and on her face was that soft, defenseless expression I once loved so painfully. Not a single sign that a moment ago her voice had echoed through the house. I stood by the door, clinging to that picture of normalcy like a drowning man clutches at a branch. Maybe it was just nerves. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe just the desperate wish to reclaim something that had long since slipped away. But with every night, the sounds grew louder, more real. Sometimes it wasn't just footsteps. Sometimes, at the very edge of hearing, I caught fragments of whispered conversations. Soft, fleeting words meant for someone else, not me. Sometimes I heard the cupboard door creak open, or the faint clink of a spoon striking a cup, splintering the quiet of the night. And yet, every time I opened my eyes, everything appeared normal. And the horror was precisely in that. There was nothing tangible to grab onto. Nothing solid enough to accuse her of. Nothing I could even accuse myself of beyond doubt and fear. Only that growing crack in my mind. Only the terror that I no longer knew what was real and what was merely the echo of something already lost. Sometimes betrayal doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers like a draft in a house you still think belongs to you. On a scrap of paper, love you forever. No name. No date. It happened by accident, as always. I was sorting through Emily's old books, looking for forgotten things, trying to keep my hands busy so I wouldn't have to listen to my own thoughts. The pages smelled of time and of her perfume, a faint trail that still lived within the paper. And suddenly, from one of the books, a small sheet of paper slipped out. Crumpled. Wrinkled as if someone had once tried to throw it away only to change their mind at the last second. I unfolded it, holding my breath. There was only a single line written on it, scrawled in a trembling hand, too unsure, too raw for an ordinary note. Love you forever. No name. No date. No explanation. A fragment of someone's confession trapped between the pages. Only not mine. I sat on the floor, the paper trembling between my fingers. The very air around me felt sharper, heavier. The words were simple, but each stroke of the pen cut deeper than any spoken betrayal. Because I knew. Those words were not meant for me. I tried to find excuses. Maybe it was an old note? Something from her youth? A forgotten memory? But my heart screamed inside me. No. This was recent. This was now. This was a living wound tucked away just a few feet from where I sat. I closed my eyes and pressed the note against my knees. As if refusing to look at it could make it disappear. As if turning away could somehow stitch reality back together. But memory had already sunk its teeth into me. The bracelet hidden in the drawer. The message glowing in the dark. The whispers behind the walls. And now these two words. Love you forever. Only not for me. I tucked the note back into the book. Closed the cover slowly like sealing a grave. And I kept living as if I had seen nothing. As if love still lived in this house. As if I was still part of a story that had long since erased me. Some confessions are never spoken aloud. You find them on scraps of paper forgotten between the lines of someone else's life. I looked at us in the old mirror, but there was only me. Sometimes I would go through her old photographs, trying to catch in them what was slipping away from reality. The lightness of her laughter. The warm glow in her eyes. The invisible thread that once bound us together. But the longer I looked, the less I recognized. In the photos, Emily seemed to be disappearing. Not all at once, no. At first, it was just small things, blurred features, a foggy gaze, a smile that didn't quite belong. Then more. In some pictures, she seemed almost transparent, like a reflection on water before a storm. I blamed it on old film, on time, on camera errors. Anything really, just to avoid admitting the obvious. She wasn't there anymore. One night, I walked up to the big old mirror in the hallway. The one we had picked out together, laughing, struggling not to drop the heavy frame. This mirror had seen us in every moment, happy, tired, fighting, making up. I looked into it and saw only myself. My reflection stood alone in the empty space. No shadow beside me. No Emily leaning over my shoulder like she used to. I reached out slowly, touching the cold glass. Dust smudged under my fingertips, but nothing changed. I was alone. And in that moment, I understood. Her presence wasn't just gone. It was thinning, fading a little more each day. Like the scent of perfume you eventually stop noticing. Like a voice you forget in pieces. Like a photograph where the ink slowly dissolves into air. I wasn't holding on to her anymore, only her shadow. Only her echo. And the harder I clung to it, the faster it slipped through my fingers. Sometimes we don't lose people all at once. Sometimes they leave slowly, silently, becoming reflections even the mirrors can no longer hold. I called her name. But there was only emptiness. At some point, fear overwhelmed reason. I don't even remember what exactly broke me. Maybe the look into the empty mirror. Maybe the photo where her face had finally blurred beyond recognition. Maybe the whispers that, this time, had become too real to ignore. I snapped. I ran through the apartment like a man in a burning house, shouting her name. Emily. My voice cracked, broke into a sound that didn't feel like my own. I checked the bathroom, flung open cabinet doors, searched behind curtains, under tables, finding nothing but stale air. The kitchen smelled only of dust. In the bedroom, there was just a dent on the bed, one that could have been made by anyone, even by the shifting air. I rushed out into the corridor, threw open the balcony door, but the street met me only with the fading light of sunset and the distant hum of cars. I screamed her name again and again, like a drowning man crying for a shore that no longer existed. And in return, only silence. Silence so thick it felt like it could drown you. Silence filled with every fear, every betrayal, every unsaid word. Silence instead of her. I stopped in the middle of the living room, gasping for breath. The room seemed huge, foreign, like a train station where I had missed the last train. I could no longer lie to myself. She was gone. Long, long ago. Maybe since the night her phone screen lit up in the dark. Maybe when I found the nameless bracelet. Maybe even earlier on those nights when I still believed that love could be saved if only I held on tighter. But you can't hold on to a shadow. You can't scream into emptiness and expect it to answer you with a voice that already belongs to another world. Sometimes loss doesn't speak in words. It speaks in the silence that will never again be the quiet between two people, only the emptiness inside one. Her favorite cup was still on the table, but the coffee inside had long dried up. The kitchen met me with a frozen moment. As if time itself had stopped, afraid to disturb what little was left of our past life. On the table stood her favorite cup, the one with the little crack in the handle she stubbornly refused to throw away. I walked closer, touched it lightly with my finger. Dust rose in the air, a soft cloud wrapping around my hand. Inside the cup, the remnants of coffee had hardened into a dry, cracked crust, like a wound that had healed too long ago to remember the pain, but still left a scar. I ran my hand along the back of the chair across from mine. It was cold, empty, like everything else around me. How many evenings had I sat here, pouring 2 cups of coffee? How many times had I placed a spoon across from me, waiting for her to sit down, to smile, to say something ordinary, to pull me back into the reality I so desperately wanted to believe in? How many times had I smiled into the void just to avoid hearing the ice cracking beneath the forgotten love? I remembered how she used to wrap her hands around her cup, as if warming herself. How she would wrinkle her nose at the first bitter sip. How she would glance at me over the rim, shyly, like it was the first time. Now there was only the cup, only the dried coffee, only the ghost of her habits. I sank into my chair slowly, as if afraid to break it, reached out to my own cup, to my own shadow of the past. And I realized, all those nights, I hadn't been dining with her. I had been dining with her absence. And every time I lied to myself, again and again. Sometimes we cling to empty seats at the table like life rafts, until we finally understand, no one is coming back. I opened the window, and for the first time in a long time, I breathed freely. Morning arrived without a knock. Quiet, cold, like a blank sheet of paper. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling how the night, full of voices, shadows, and emptiness, was finally receding. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the urge to check the hallway. Didn't need to look in the kitchen. No more convincing myself she was still here. I got up and walked to the window. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. Rather, from a strange lightness, an unfamiliar emptiness inside me that, this time, didn't scare me. I threw the window wide open. The morning chill hit my face, stung my eyes. Fresh air smelled of something new, sharp, honest. It smelled like freedom. A freedom I wasn't ready for, but that had come anyway. I stood barefoot on the cold floor, watching as the city slowly woke up. In my hands was the folder, the one I had once hidden so carefully, trying not to believe. Squares of light flared in distant windows. Cars started their lazy morning drift. Smoke curled up from chimneys. Without her, without illusions, without the heavy burden of pretending I had dragged behind me for months. I hadn't betrayed her memory. I hadn't destroyed the days when I loved her with everything I had. I had simply stopped fighting for something that had long since died. The whole truth was in that folder, spelled out in just a few sentences, a date and my signature. She had died. Car accident. I let Emily go, quietly, without words, without scenes, and I took the first breath of my new life. But the words from that note I once found would stay with me forever, living inside me. I let her go, but I would never forget. A full breath, without fear, without expectations. Sometimes goodbye isn't spoken out loud. Sometimes goodbye is the first free breath at sunrise.